Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM with co-host Vas Laricos. Vas, how you doing?
Welcome back, Ken. Welcome back for sure. Sounds like you enjoyed your trip. Looking forward to discussing free agency with you today. We're rapidly approaching the new league year. Starts next week, and really the tampering period begins on Monday. And the Ravens are currently set up with $19.5 million in cap space.
Yeah, that's not effective cap, so that's important to note. The Ravens only have about $10 million, I think it is, after you figure in the signings, and that's important for the Ravens, who have a league low 48 players under contract. There's no team with as few players as the Ravens have under contract. And for example, the Chargers have 63 players under contract. So they're in theory in a better spot. I don't know how many of those players are injured for the Chargers, but they're in theory in a better spot. So
Sure.
the Ravens, their cap picture is not quite as rosy when you get that out of there. Of course, the big 800-pound gorilla, so to speak, in the room is Lamar Jackson in terms of the free agency. Sorry, the extension that would really help the Ravens free up some cap room here. In particular, I consider this to be a fairly minor element, but there is an $8 million signing bonus or roster bonus, not a signing bonus, that is due at the start of the league year. Puts a little more pressure on the extension to go now.
Yeah, we really don't have any answers as to what the holdup is. Steve Bisciotti there at the Costa seemed ready to make Lamar Jackson the highest paid player in the league again with the same exact structure of the previous contract, which took a while for them to negotiate. The no trade clause, the no franchise clause, the high levels of guaranteed money. Is it Lamar's aiming for fully guaranteed? Is he looking to see maybe the direction of the team moving forward? We're not really sure.
Yeah, if it's the one that's scary to me is the direction of the team moving forward. I mean, this team has to have Lamar Jackson fully committed to it, and in fact, Lamar needs to signal in permanent terms and ink that he's going to be here for the next 6 years for the Ravens to make a lot of the free agency decisions that will last for 2, 3, and 4 years to make them really pay off. Well, certainly for the ones that are 3 and 4 years. And that includes any of the free agents we're going to talk about a little later that they may sign from other teams, or even, re-signing a player like Tyler Linderbaum. They couldn't realistically do if they didn't know Lamar wasn't going to be the man behind the center. It wouldn't make sense to overpay a center for that period.
Agreed. So the other potential option is to restructure Lamar's contract, which Steve Bisciotti made mention of at the post-firing conference. $52 million base salary. So that could be prorated over the life of the deal, which already includes 2 void years. So you would split the 52 over 4 years, basically adding $13 million per year, including 2 years that he's not on the team. It doesn't sound like a great option. The only thing that says, it's not a terrible option is if you did do that and DaCosta did not use all the cap space, you could roll it over to next year to help pay off that debt.
So here's what I'm going to say about this. The restructuring of those dollars is all just accounting, and it doesn't really matter that much other than that you're borrowing from the future. I hate borrowing from the future in general. So I'm not a fan of that. I think every dollar you borrow from a future year, you need to take with great care to decide whether it's the right move or not. I'm not sure this team is ready to win the Super Bowl right now, Lamar or no Lamar, unfortunately. I mean, there's a huge number of free agents leaving. It's a great new opportunity, new coaching staff. It might, they might catch lightning in a bottle. And I love the coaching moves they made and the risks they took, in going here. But it's not clear to me that this is the team that's going to win the Super Bowl. And I don't think it's worth investing every future dollar the way the Eagles and the Browns have with the Piper paying that will come down the road from that. I also am encouraging people to look at contracts on one accounting basis, and that is, not looking at, for instance, say a post-June 1 cut versus a pre-June 1 cut. I mean, it's all just accounting. The teams have a lot of ways to move money into the future. It's just not usually a wise thing to do. It's you want to limit the total amount of it you do, so you're in good spots. The Ravens have a great attitude towards it. They want to be in the top half of the cash spend every year. That's a great way to put it. And they do a good job of maintaining that year over year, as opposed to going crazy on borrowing relative to other teams.
That short-term outlook is a pet peeve of mine as well. And they say, "Oh, look, Lamar or Roquan's only going to cost $5 million against the cap next year." Yeah, but 3 years from now, you're going to pay the piper. A couple other ways that the Ravens can make money, or cap space, I should say. Based on Eric DeCosta's comments at the combine, it does appear that both Marlon Humphrey and Roquan Smith are going to be on the team. It's not set in stone. They could go to each of them and ask for a pay cut, which I think is a possibility. The other two likely cuts, at least in my view, I'd like to see if you agree, Ken. Roderick Washington could open up $4 million, and Justice Hill $3.2 million. So that's another $7 million added on to that 19. Give you a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, they're both sure things to be cut, frankly. And Justice has been a really good player for the Ravens. Broderick Washington less so. Honestly, this contract has been kind of as we've turned out, a mistake in terms of the original signing. That's unfortunate, but I don't think there's any question about either one of them. I think you're right in terms of Marlon, that they go to him, ask him to take a pay cut. This is also, I believe, the time to ask him to move to safety. I think it also makes a lot of sense for the Ravens in terms of filling an important need there and maintaining an option to bring him back to corner, which I think is almost 100% chance. Oh, not 100, 80% chance that he ends up playing some corner for the Ravens in 2025, even if he starts camp as a safety. A lot of the complaints about Starks were that he's not playing his college position. Well, he didn't play his college position all that well in terms of yards per target. That was a big problem. And, if you're going to ask him to play a lot he's either got to do one of two things. He's got to really learn how to play the free safety position at a high level. His first year was okay. It wasn't great. Certainly wasn't like some of the other safeties around the league who splashed in other ways, though yards per target was a problem for a lot of them. And then, the Ravens need one more safety anyway to look at their 3 safety packages, let alone their 4 safety packages, for which, you make the argument they need Ardarius Washington or Alohi Gilman as well.
Yeah, so I would agree with all of that. I actually not sure if they're going to bring back either of the two unrestricted free agent safeties. Gilman would be maybe the last one on the list of who I'd like to bring back personally. He just missed too many tackles and didn't show a lot of range. But, just setting a rumor out there, there's still a chance that Roquan could be moved. And I'm not going to make the case for that again. I did that a few episodes back, but apparently the Giants released Okereke and are interested in trading for Tremaine Edmonds, who's the Bears linebacker, the guy that the Bears signed to replace Roquan for almost the same cost. There might be a way to make that happen. But let me just bring up one other point as far as cap space, and this is news to me today on Thursday. Brian McFarland put online that Andrew Voorhees hit the playing time accelerator, and his cap hit next year would be $3.7 million. And all of that could be recouped if they did release him.
Right. So it's an escalator. It's not a guaranteed dollar amount. It's only if he stays on that rookie deal, he gets to keep it. The Ravens could go back to him and say, "Hey, we're not paying you that. We'll reset your contract at a lower level." Go ahead.
Could they? Because he's only been 2 years, though. I thought you can't touch a contract for 3 years. You can't do an extension until you've completed 3. The only reason I remember that is because the former co-host of the afternoon show on radio made that point about Marlon, saying that DeCosta was cheap, and even though it was impossible, you're not allowed to extend somebody after 2.
So it's release, or they're not allowed to go back to him and ask for it. That could well be correct. Now he had a redshirt year and he's had 2 years. So this is his 3rd year still, not his 4th. He hasn't completed that service time. So you may well be correct. This is the kind of question I would go to Brian on. I can't say I know for sure myself, but there's several ways they can certainly make money. I'm not too concerned about their ability if they, to not be able to come up with money if they want to go out and go big on the free agent market or re-sign Linderbaum or do any of the other things on their team that they have some players that we're going to talk about next who we want them to retain. They've got the money to do it. I mean, if they structure these contracts right, it'll be okay. But it's it's also, they've got to be careful because whatever contracts they do this year, and they appear to be at a point where they might be fairly active in free agency. All those contracts will come due at approximately the same time. If they sign a bunch of 3 and 4 year deals, which is typical in free agency, then they're going to have a bunch of guys whose contracts come due, and the bubble kind of the pig and the python when the cap really hits is going to be at the same time. And it may be about the same time that additional Lamar Jackson dollars are hitting.
Yeah, it's definitely a puzzle. These next 3, 4, 5 days are going to be interesting to see where they go, what happens, especially with the Lamar money. I think they do have too many pressing needs to sit out the first wave of free agency as they've done in previous years. I'm not expecting them to make 4 splashes, but maybe re-sign a couple of your guys and bring in a couple outside guys, not $30 million guys, but a couple $15 million guys maybe. So we'll see. We'll see.
A couple of 15 AAV guys or a couple of $15 million total contracts?
I think probably a couple, maybe 115, I'd say. Yeah,
I'm with you. Now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's go into what we really anticipated to be the meat and potatoes of this show, unless we have something else to add to that in terms of ways they can generate cap space. And that is the 5 most important UFAs for the team to return. I'm going to run through this list because it is a long list. I'll do that once, and then Vas and I will each give our 5-to-1 list of how we would order the importance of these returns. Chidobe Awuzie, Daniel Faalele, Alohi Gilman, DeAndre Hopkins, Jake Hummel, Tyler Huntley, Draymond Jones, Charlie Kolar, Isaiah Likely, Tyler Linderbaum, Keaton Mitchell, who's an RFA, Joe Noteboom, David Ajabo, Patrick Ricard, Jordan Stout, Britt Urban, Kyle Van Noy, Tylen Wallace, and Ardarius Washington. That is a hellacious list of talented players that are walking out the door. There's some disappointments in there that we won't mind seeing go, but a lot of talent as well.
Yes. Before I give my 5th, I'll just give 2 quick notes on guys that we're not going to touch on because they're not on either of our lists. Linderbaum seems to be going for maximum value regardless of anything, and it just doesn't seem like that he's going to return at this point. Maybe I'm going to be shocked. A lot of people are saying, look at the Ronnie Stanley situation. Looked like he wasn't going to come back, and then he did. Well, that's a totally different situation. You're talking about a second contract versus a 3rd contract. Linderbaum wants to maximize his value. The second one I just want to make, unless you want to respond to that, Ken, I'm sorry.
I'll respond to that because I think we need to talk about Tyler Linderbaum to show people that we're really giving this its due. There's an amount I would overpay Tyler Linderbaum to keep him around, and I don't think there's a 0% chance that will occur at effectively the 23rd hour right here, where Lamar's extension is signed and Tyler Linderbaum. I almost think that pair of dominoes would need to fall. And so Linderbaum, if the Ravens could get him at $20 million, I'm not excited by the deal. In fact, I think it's clearly an overpay for Linderbaum, who's combination of run and pass blocking, as we've said many times on this show, as I've said a multiple of that number of times on my own shows, is not what you want. Then I don't have a problem with them doing it, but they the recent talk that Albert Breer says that he wants $25 million. I think he's finally got the rest of the Ravens fan base on board with letting him walk.
Agreed. Well said. So I guess I'll kind of give my honorable mention because I think you have one here too, and that would be Keaton Mitchell. He's a restricted player. I think he's a great lightning element to Derrick Henry's thunder. He did taper off towards the end of the season last year, and he obviously has some injury risk. I think the restricted number is probably too high. But if they could come to terms on a 2-year, say a 2-year $5 million or 2-year $6 million deal, that would be ideal. So that'd be my honorable mention.
Yeah, that would be fine, and I think that's what will happen. They may even tender him just so they have the right of first refusal. The tender is not guaranteed, so they even if they say we're going to pay you that. In notably in the past at the same point, 2 guys, I think it was Jensen and Hurst, both got reduced in the same season. I think it was Jensen and Hurst, and they had their RFA tenders reduced from whatever it was at the time. It had been $2.5 million to 1 point something million. So anyway, I've got Mitchell in a different color coding on this too. I think they can make that situation work. So let's go to your number 5 guy.
Number 5 for me is Tyler Huntley, backup quarterback, came in, played well last year, better than he's played at any point previously. Hypothetically, notched the Ravens their 2 most impressive wins of the year when you talk about 2 playoff teams. And I think he's really a glue guy, a guy that helps the the locker room element, the environment. He grew up with Lamar. He's a great backup. Lamar, he's missed time now, 3 of the last, 5 years or 4 years with injuries. So you probably want to pencil in a game or two, even though Jesse Minter said they may use Lamar's legs less to preserve him. So if you could get Tyler Huntley for a $3 million average on a 2-year deal, he'd be my 5th guy.
I love what Tyler Huntley did for the team, especially this last year. I guess one question I would have is Taylon Green of Arkansas a guy who would interest you as a player to replace Huntley? You get a younger player, you're starting fresh again, new 4-year deal, and none of this year-to-year pay the market value for a player, which honestly, with Huntley's case, could be pretty low. And more of a match for Lamar's skill set, not as good a passer, obviously, but who is, and faster even than Lamar, but probably not as good and not as effective a runner, even though he certainly was that at Arkansas.
Sure, absolutely. He's a special athlete for sure. Depends what kind of offense they want to run with Declan Doyle. And, Huntley may not be a perfect fit. He was probably a better fit in the previous regime. So we'll see how that works. If Huntley's generating offers north of $3 million, I'm probably not interested, but on a low cost deal, I would like to have him back.
I think that's the right ballpark, and I don't have any problem with that. I also wouldn't have any problem if he's a speed dial option. If he goes someplace and he's on the practice squad there, Tyler, hey, we'll be calling you if anything happens. They probably are at a place where they're going to draft a mid to late round, probably a late round QB, day 3 QB of some sort. Unfortunately, Green is a guy who might have been a round 6 pick, but then he had that combine, and that didn't happen anymore. So now he's an investment and probably a 4th round pick, maybe even a 3rd round pick, in which case I'm definitely out. But he looks more like a Malik Willis kind of a clone is not the right word, but style of player where you're gonna go for his legs a lot. You're gonna hope that he gets his arm under control.
Yeah, backups that could scramble and run are always valuable because they give the defense a different look.
All right, my number 5 guy is Jordan Stout. His value as a punter went way up this last year. There is some concern about that paying off a punter's big year, but he's also been a very good holder for his career. The discussions I've had with people with the Ravens and with the by Tucker's own admission is that Tucker was going through kind of the decline phase of his career. So we went through a period of really wondering, is part of this Jordan Stout as a holder? Because his Tucker's 3 years of decline with the Ravens were Stout's first 3 years, but then Loop had a very good year this last year, the last kick aside. And, I think that Jordan Stout played a big role in that. So he's my number 5 guy. I want the Ravens to retain him. Actually, it's kind of difficult to come up with a 5th guy here. You came up with Huntley, but there's other guys who are, are they priced out? Are they really valuable at all that are towards the bottom of the list?
We're in lockstep on that. I pretty much was a 3-way tie between Huntley, Stout, and Mitchell for me as far as the 5th guy. I had a feeling you'd take Stout, so I'm certainly on board to retain Stout at a reasonable deal. About $3 million or so. But that said, I hope the Ravens are pumping a lot less in the on his next contract. All right, moving on to my number 4, DeAndre Hopkins. He's an aging guy. I think he played pretty well last year in limited opportunity. I thought he was a good influence on the locker room. What really appeals to me about him is that he fulfills the skill set of the potentially departing Isaiah Likely as a guy that can go up and get a contested catch when Lamar enters the second play, as they're now calling it. DeAndre Hopkins has always been a contested catch guy. I remember years ago when he was on the Texans and he caught 2 or 3 contested catches over Marlon Humphrey. And Humphrey said after the game, his hands are just twice as big as mine. He's just going to get those. I can't stop it. So I think if you want to have 4 quality receiving options, especially if you're going to run more 11 personnel, which we've talked about and I think is probable, maybe not all the way up to 50, but maybe 40% from the 30 that they were. And, Yeah. So my number would be like 3 to 4 million with some of the incentives that can take it back up to the $5 million range where he was last year.
So, first of all, I'm fine with that deal if he were to come back at that price. But he's still not. He doesn't make my top five. I have got a couple reasons for this. First of all, I want to go into your contested catch point for a second. DeAndre Hopkins is a good contested catch player at basically one schematic way above others, and that is you want to get him on an island against the corner outside the numbers. That's not that he never shows up in the middle of the field, but it's not the greatest place for a contested catch for him. So he's different from Isaiah Likely in that way, where Isaiah Likely, I think really anywhere on the field can make a contested play for you, which is and get free late and do all the things. I mean, Hopkins is just not a real get free late at this point guy. He's not a huge extended play option. So, while I like Hopkins, I thought he brought a lot to the team. I think, he's got a little bit different opinion of himself, which you can see from any receiver in terms of how much he can contribute to the offense. My second problem with bringing him back is I think it reduces the play time you get to Tez Walker. Yeah. And Walker is still, he looks like a talent that's really being almost a lid is being kept on him at this point. I want to see him do more. And by the way, James Ogden does not agree with me. He thinks that Tez Walker is more of a one-trick pony on the deep ball. I think we saw enough improvement on the combination of comeback versus deep that's why he was able to leverage more deep success last year.
Yeah, I'm on your side of the coin with Tez Walker. I'm very excited about his future with this team of the remaining 2 years of his rookie deal. Just DeAndre, I think, gives you more bang for the buck. When you look at the list of UFA wide receivers, Mike Evans is going to make way more money. Mm-hmm. Stephon Diggs got cut out. There's a lot of guys. He fits the mold as the X that for a good price, who's already had experience in the scheme. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be enough more plays on offense, which will give more targets to go around to everybody.
Could be. I mean, if they get back to the Ravens' old level of success, they'll have less passes, not more. So they'll that's the unfortunate thing. And that's not terrible. Hopkins could play more plays. He could be more effective as a run blocker and do some things that could really help the team. But I'm with you on the contract level. You've got the right price on him. So I think we're in agreement basically there. Let me go to my number 4 guy, and that's Chidobe Awuzie. The Ravens have a very old corner room, but they also have an unstable corner room. And particularly if they want to move Marlon Humphrey this year, and I really want that done if he's going to stay with the Ravens, I'd like it to be at safety where the expectation be that he's going to be at safety. He comes back, he plays corner. That's okay. But I want basically their plans to be around him not counting towards their cornerback totem pole of depth. And Awuzie had a good year last year. He'll be a little bit expensive. It's very price dependent, but if it's 5 to 6.5 million, say between 10 and 13 million for 2 years, I'd be good with that. And I'll just see if anybody else will offer more. In fact, I might send him to the market with a pretty good offer like that he doesn't feel bad about coming back and says, you know what, Eric, let me have that deal after he checks it out.
So he's my number 3. Chidobe is my number 3. Just in sequence here, I agree with everything you said. He was the Ravens' highest graded cornerback last year. Better than Nate, better than Marlon. I definitely agree with your idea about Marlon. I almost feel like it's Marlon and Kyle can work in tandem, where if Kyle's on the back end, Marlon's in the slot, and if Kyle's in the slot, Marlon's on the back end, vice versa. So I would like to bring Chidobe back, and the number I wrote down was 6 million, so we're right in that same ballpark.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
Only 1 year, though. Only a 1 year deal because of the injury history.
Okay, so you don't want a 2-year deal. Okay. And even something where you're paying, say, $8 million for the first year, can get out of 5 the second, you're not okay with that. So it's all structured.
You're borrowing from the future when you do it like that.
You are if he doesn't play the second year. If he plays the second year, you're fine paying the money. So
if push came to shove and he needed that second year and it was team friendly, I would go for it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. So your number 3 guy was Awuzie. So my number 3 guy is Charlie Kohler. He is a very balanced value set to the Ravens. Definitely has not been unlocked as a receiver yet. I think he still could be, and we've seen him show up at some key times, which was nice this last year. Outstanding blocker. That's one of the things he gives you. Certainly is an inline tight end. if they don't bring back him and they don't bring back Ricard, I mean, they're really starting over in terms of inline tight end bodies. So that's hard for me to believe they'd really want to do that. But Kohler will be a guy who's in demand, I'm afraid. The nice thing about him, the thing that might mute some of the demand for him, is he's not outstanding in any one area. He's a pretty good blocker. He's a very good special teams player. And he's a good pass catcher in the very limited opportunities he's had with the Ravens. There'll be going to be a lot of teams that look at that and they just say, yeah, well, there's nothing that really stands out to me about this guy, and they may not give it a chance.
So Charlie, probably surprisingly, is my number one on my list, and I estimate his value at $8 million over 3 years. 3 years times 8. He's pretty comparable to Josh Oliver, who departed the Ravens for the Vikings, as a guy that's pretty good but not outstanding in any areas. I'm doubtful that Ricard is going to return because of the age, injury history, potential of not using much fullback, and the appeal for John Harbaugh to bring him in as a culture setter in New York. Mm-hmm. So that really vaults Charlie up the list. I think Doyle's going to run a lot of 12, and he ran a lot of 13 personnel. Those are probably going to be the 3 main packages, 11, 12, and 13. And I think Charlie's an ascending player with untapped potential as a receiver, as we saw in college. When he was in college, he was a high target volume receiver, but he's come on as a blocker. And Lamar really seems to like him too. They seem to have a really good rapport. Just on press conferences, they're joking with each other and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Kohler's definitely, he's kind of a comic at the podium. Eric Weddle is another guy who kind of had this characteristic. It almost it seems like they're not taking the game seriously, but both Kohler and Weddle are very, productive players on a per snap basis. So that wasn't really the issue. The issue was kind of like, how seriously do you appear to be taking the game? And there's just, there are people who are more. So anyway, it's an interesting call at number one. I have 2 guys ahead of him. I guess you haven't said your number 2 guy, so why don't you go to 2 then?
Number 2 for me is Draymond Jones, midseason acquisition. Really brought a lot of energy and attitude and aggression to the defense. I like the fact that he's pretty good against the run. I like the fact that he can kick inside on pass downs. They give you some juice there. He's not an elite pass rusher. His pressure rate was about 10%, and that's a new stat that I'm going to use a lot this offseason. Pressures divided by pass rush snaps. Okay. So it's about 10% for him, which means he's probably going to be in the $10 million range, which I think a 3-year deal, $10 million each, would be fine to me. I don't think he's a solution to the edge, but he can be one of the 4 and raise the floor of the room. And so, yeah, he's my second.
Not a bad choice. And he's my second also. I think I have similar reasons. I want the multiple things he gives you. First of all, Draymond's numbers probably reduced slightly, although I thought he was better with the Ravens than even he'd been with Tennessee. He delivered a lot of quarterback hits for the Ravens, which resulted in a slightly higher close rate. And when you project that forward, if he's doing as much kick inside with the Ravens, then I think that probably hurt his pressure rate a little bit. So that's something that, but he's not my number 2 guy. Also very cool with the contract level that you're setting there. I wonder if they're going to be able to get him for that. It might end up being 3 for 38 or something by the time we get it. And that, I guess that wouldn't be
there's a lot of edge rushers this year. So at some point, there really is. It's probably one of the deepest positions of UFAs.
And definitely a place where the Ravens have shown a lot of talent, bringing in some older guys that we'll talk about in the next list we're going to go through, which is a league-wide free agents. Who's your number 1 guy was Kohler?
Yes.
All right. So I have my number 1 guy is likely, and I don't believe it's happening, by the way. I do believe he's pricing himself out of town. So in a lot of ways, I probably just should have made him in the same category as Linderbaum, that I don't think the Ravens are going to come to an agreement with him. If there weren't some things already that have been done in terms of bridge burning, then I think it would be more likely. But we saw him show up on TV and was talking the other day about how he's probably leaving the Ravens, the reports, I don't know if they're true or not. I don't have firsthand information that he had some sort of a party, to be happy about the departure of John Harbaugh. If it was, it's not a good look. If it didn't occur, it's not a factor at all. He's very important to what the Ravens do, and he could probably do more. I think if he was back, we'd probably see a easier transition out of the Mark Andrews contract after 2 years, probably, and likely would just become the number one, probably either in the first or second year of this deal.
Yeah, if I thought there was a chance likely could be brought back, I would have had him close to the top. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to pay two
Right
close to the top of the market tight ends. I know he's very close with Lamar. They went back and forth on social media while you were abroad. Lamar said, "Come back to the Ravens" or something. He wants him back. They're really close.
Mm-hmm.
The ironic, maybe not ironic, but the interesting part is he's probably going to get a contract pretty darn similar to Mark Andrews in terms of APY in the $13 million range. The difference is that would have been much more guaranteed. I think the likely contract, the Andrews contract, I'm trying to pull it up here, but last I looked, they could get out of it after 1 year and still recoup money on it. It was a very team-friendly deal.
Right. The OTC presentation of that, I think, missed some important component that Brian was telling me about. I think that was the case. So it was really a 2-year, $23 million deal or something.
I'm looking at it now on OTC. If there's something else that I'm not aware of, but it says after the 2027 season, there'd be $5 million in dead money and 9.6 in potential cap savings.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I was using that as my original source, and there was some issue with it that it didn't quite work out that team friendly.
All things being equal, I wish Eric would have maybe wait to played out the string. I think he really wanted to have one tight end under contract. He didn't want to have zero. I think he even said that on one of the appearances he made recently, and that's unfortunate. But all things being equal, I would have preferred likely over Andrews long term, but it is what it is.
Well, we're gonna do some draft content together, no doubt, particularly on as we watch the draft together, and I think we'll have fun with that. First of all, encourage everybody to join us for that, and particularly day 3 is a big tight end group that the Ravens will have lots of choices apparently this year, and look forward to that. And they have guys out in the open market who they might go after as well. We may get to them in some of our lists next. So that's
just real quick, Ken. Did you see the guy from Auburn jumped 45.5 inches, Stowers, at the combine? That's the second highest vertical jump of any player since they've been recording it or something. He's a tight end.
That's interesting. I saw they had 243.5s, and unfortunately, I'm still catching up on the combine right now. Because we got back and I didn't have a chance to watch it over there. In fact, one of the frustrating things about YouTube, you try and watch combine highlights, and I was able to go to a tweet and actually watch the game-winning goal for the United States in overtime, both the women's and the men's game. So that was at least I could get that. But for most things on YouTube, I want to watch combine highlights and said the uploader has not approved the content for your country. And it's just okay, you don't want Ugandans to watch football. I get it. I don't, but I know. All right, so let's go and talk about the UFAs the Ravens might go after from the general market here. I know we're gonna have some of the same players on this, but do you want to go just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 right now?
Absolutely. And, obviously the idea behind this free agent period is to walk into the draft without your hands tied. Yes. You want to fill as many as you can, or you could line up and play before the draft if you could. I'm actually shading a little bit older on the acquisitions that I'm looking for outside this year because I think it gives you better bang for your buck. The 3rd, 4th contract guys aren't going for quite as much as the 3rd. I do have 1 3rd, but the rest of them are a little – well, I do have 1 2nd too, but a little bit older. My 5th guy. Khalil Mack, 35 years old. His projection is 1 year, $14 million on PFF. He had a 15% pressure rate, so he missed part of the year. He's familiar with Minter's system. He's probably the best run stuffing edge since Suggs, I would say, and a likely Hall of Famer. If he wasn't as old, I probably would have had him higher on the list. I want the jumbo edge. The power edges are the guys I really like for this. They're the ones that worked out best over the years.
All right, so Khalil Mack, I'm just not as high on him as other people, and it's age related. He just turned 35 in February here. It's not like he's not a pretty good pass rusher still, but he's just got a very moderate kind of a close rate, 12 out of 42 this last year. So that's what D14 is 21.4%. That's not particularly good. Away in his last year at the Ravens, for example, was almost 50%.
I was going to say, beat him to the ball with the Chargers. That's what it was. Beat him to the ball.
Well, he did. He certainly did. Khalil Mack is still playing a decent number of snaps, but he's a guy who I would expect to play less than he did this last year with the Ravens. So if we're talking about a guy who's going to get us, 25 snaps per game, that might even be too high. That'd be 425 for a season. And that's if he stayed healthy. That might be too much. I think he'd be a situational pass rusher only, so you don't get the real value of his run defense. The Ravens have guys. I mean, if they have Draymond Jones, Tavius certainly, they're going to want to start with that. Hopefully this is not a year where they make Mike Green a situational pass rusher. Where they make Mike Green a 2-down outside linebacker again.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
1,000% agree there. Yeah. Who's your fifth?
Right. My number 5, guys, Leo Chenal of Kansas City. This is not a big spend, I don't think. I think they can get him reasonably cheap. He's a good 2-down run defender, passable coverage skills, get you past some of the injury concerns they have with Teddy Buchanan. He's a possible replacement, I think, for Roquan down the line, or the combination of Buchanan and Chenal is. I love Chenal coming out of school. Great tackler, absolutely drives through a tackler. When you look at him on a tape, it's borne out by the metrics. You're going to hear me say that over and over again through draft night, is the players who their metrics corroborate what the general group think is from the film are the guys I really love. And Chenal had that in college in a big way, but it's 6.0 stops to missed tackle ratio this last season with Kansas City. And he's a passable pass defender in coverage, but doesn't do it a whole lot, honestly. They use him as pass rusher a fair amount, and I think he'd be a great addition to solidify the linebacker role.
I like Chenal coming out a lot as well. He was really one of the key players when KC shut down the Ravens' run game in the conference championship game a couple years back. If they didn't have Roquan, I'd be interested, but the Ravens already have the number 1 linebacker spend in the league, so I'm not interested in paying more, putting more eggs in that basket. That applies to free agency and the draft. Even if Sonny Styles somehow fell to 14, I would be against it. I would. That's just my philosophy.
You could still cut Roquan at that point.
Yeah, if you trade Roquan, then fine. But even then, to me, and I know we disagree a little bit, you think you want to have one highly priced linebacker and go cheap.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. Yeah.
My ideal roster build would be going cheap at both of those spots and putting that money on the D-line. So that's just my 2 cents. All right, number 4 for me, another aging pass rusher. Stop me if you've heard the Ravens have success with that before. And this guy's one of our old friends, Jadeveon Clowney, 33 years old. His contract projection is 1 year, $10 million. He had an 18% pressure rate with the Cowboys last year. And again, a force player. We saw how the defensive lineman really benefited from the early pressures he created for the Ravens a couple years ago.
So here's my thought on Clowney. Clowney's 33 years old now. Okay, for starters, he's still a hell of a pass rusher. and he put up some good sack numbers, and he really has never been bad as a pass rusher, despite the fact that he never lived up to being the number one pick. If you talk to most people, and it
Mhm.
just shows you how difficult it is to actually live up to being the number one overall pick, because he's been a great one. Um, I, he is a guy, because of age, who might drop into the Ravens price range. I
Mhm.
really don't like him at 9 or 10 million. I think it's too much. But I love him if you can get him at 4 million plus incentives to 8 million kind of thing. I'd love it. I'd love it at that level. 3 million plus incentives to 8 million, whatever. Clowney really seems like the kind of guy too. Been kind of a mercenary in his career,
Yeah.
moved around a lot, who seems to like to bet on himself in terms
Mhm.
of doing that, and generally has gotten paid off for it. Certainly did with the Ravens. And I hope he would get paid off again with incentivized dollars.
Yeah, so he made less than that last time with the Ravens for sure. I think it was like 5 million
Yeah.
with maybe $6 million. I think he hit the incentive. He got 10 sacks or something and got the six,
Yep.
something like that. Comparing him to some of the younger guys who are projected to get more per year on a multi-year deal, who have a lesser pressure rate, that's why I kind of favored him.
Okay. Well, it certainly he did not have a problem delivering pressure, and never really has. And the Ravens pass rush was so much better with him. I really like that. I just, again, an old player, I'm always kind of tread very lightly. It's thin ice you're working with there when you do that. I got my number 4 guy, who is another pass rusher, and this one would be a big chance. Boye Mafe, who had a terrible close rate last year. He had a decent amount of pressure, 44 pressures on the year per PFF. Only 4 of those resulted in a quarterback hit or a sack. So it's a 9% close rate, as I define that. The pressures are still solid. The missed tackle rate, by the way, is excellent. You don't get that from every outside linebacker. I'd want him at a bargain price. I don't know what the market is going to be like for him. He's a real unknown. I know there are people who like him. I know there are people
Mhm.
who think a young player, good chance still. But it all depends on price, and I'd be willing to go a little higher, I think, on a young player like that, where I think there's a chance that a new defensive coordinator, a new system, has a chance to make him a better pass rusher. And of course, he's coming from McDonald in
Similar.
Seattle.
All
Yeah.
right.
Um,
So I'm glad you're doing the close rates because I have the pressure rates. So he got 40, well, at least for PFF, he had 40 pressures, but that was on 340 pass rushes. That's only 12%.
this-
Um,
okay, I thought it was
yeah.
44, so I think it was 40 pressures, and then 2 quarterback hits and 2 sacks. We
And-
are dealing with the
yeah.
same number base, but it's okay.
Anyway, not quite as good as the older guys that I mentioned with my first two. I think there's going to be the championship premium because he did win the Super Bowl. And this is one of the other reasons is his projection was 3 years at 16 and a third per year. So that's significantly more than some
Wouldn't
of the
pay
guys.
that.
Yeah. I know a lot of people like him and I wouldn't be against him, but I don't want to, give the guy a cornerstone contract. That to me is almost bordering on cornerstone contract territory.
What about, let's say he was at what I think my number would be, which is 3 years and 32 million.
Yeah. A comparable contract to Draymond, I'm for it for sure.
Okay. All right. Even though he's got the much lower close rate, you'd be good with that. Just so
Yeah,
we know.
it's pass rush is going to be a collaboration between multiple players and defensive tackles and outs and edges and everything, and you just want waves of guys that can get pressure. That's really how, at least the way I see it, as far as what they did in Seattle and the Chargers. Number 3 for me.
Yep.
Connor McGovern, Buffalo Bills center, 28 years old. Now he is on his 3rd contract somehow at 28. I'm not sure how that worked out. His projection is a 3-year contract at 13 million APY. So, maybe 2/3 of what Linderbaum is worth. He does have guard center versatility. He's been durable, and he had the 6th best pass pro grade at center per PFF last season.
Okay, he's one of the better centers in the league. That's still a lot to pay. And here's what I like. Very balanced pass and run block. So you don't have the Linderbaum problem of he's a great run blocker and a lousy pass blocker or a mediocre pass blocker. And that adds up to something that PFF says he's great and I say he's not. This at least in McGovern's case, it's balanced. There are other guys who you get a better pass blocker. And my number 3 guy is in that category. But Connor McGovern, I wouldn't have a problem if they signed him. 39 million for 3 years seems still a little bit high. A player like McGovern, he probably will get it. but I'd like to get 3 for 33 maybe if I were making the commitment to him. He gets to play with Lamar Jackson. He gets to hopefully play in a system which is going to make him look better than he even is, as both a pass and run blocker. I don't know. I do sense there'll be some demand, but he's not the only center. In fact, my number 3. If anything else to say about that?
Is your number 3 guy a center or a guard?
My number 3 guy's a center.
Yes, that was so nice.
So the guy I like is Cade Mays of Carolina. Yeah. He's an enormous guy, 6'6", 325. Good combination pass blocker and run blocker, but he's got the good combination, meaning he's a better pass blocker than he is a run blocker. Yeah. And that kind of fits with his frame. He's got good length for a center, but a guy that I would think would be a give the Ravens more of what they want as a pass blocker. And he's not going to be the run blocker that Linderbaum was. I mean, nobody is. So you're going to lose something there. And I think the Ravens probably need to go in that direction.
Yeah, I thought long and hard about Mays. I actually had him on the list and did not have McGovern. And then I changed my mind later before I finalized it. He's a little tall for a center at 6'6", which is a little bit unusual. PFF had something like he had 20% missed run blocks or something, which was a little bit concerning. I've liked him since he was in college. I've made mention of him in previous shows. He's younger, and he's only projected at $4.5 million for a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I think that he and Lloyd Cushenberry are the centers in recent years who've had really extreme length and height that have been good. Now, Lloyd Cushenberry, I think he might only be 6'3" or 6'4", but he was a 34-inch arms, and Cade Mays is up there at 34 and 8. I'm not saying that's the reason, particularly on a center, to go for him, but he's not going to have a lot of the pass blocking problems. It should be a corroboration that his pass blocking is not a mirage. Where Linderbaum, we've had glimpses of okayness and of some solid play, and some other metrics from PFF that would show his situation was bad in terms of like down and distance and how many times he was facing more difficult pass rush situations. But I think Cade probably gives you a little bit more, and he certainly hasn't played in a particularly advantaged situation with Carolina.
Oh, for sure. No question about that. The center market as a whole, just give a couple thoughts. I think it's going to be pretty robust, and I think a lot of teams need centers. You have guys retiring. Cushenberry was released, which we should also note plays into the compensatory formula and he's his own blocker too. That's what he came out as, Cushenberry. But I wouldn't be surprised if McGovern gets paid more than his projection, and I think Mays probably definitely gets paid more than his projection too. There's a lot of money out there, and the teams that have a lot of money, they need interior linemen. On the other side, it's a pretty good draft crop of interior linemen. A lot of people like the center class. There's some really intriguing offensive guards. Some of those guys watching the combine on the side to side drill. I forget what they call it. They slide. They were really impressive for big guys. So that leads me into my number 2, who's offensive guard, another old friend of ours, Mr. Kevin Zeitler, 36 years old. He's looking at a $9.5 million contract. He's had put up 2 strong years since he left the Ravens. 9th best pass blocking grade among guards last year for Tennessee. Not an advantageous place. I think you need one of the two. If Linderbaum's leaving, I'd like to have a veteran either come in and fill either right guard or center, or even left guard, and Emory Jones could go to right guard. But I would like to see one steady, above-average pass blocking veteran added to the interior.
Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable, and I wouldn't mind a project player, like a reclamation project. Kenyon Green, they still have under contract, I believe. They could. Cushenberry would be a reasonable player to bring in at the right price and see if you can rehabilitate him. Hasn't been great certainly so far, but it could be a guy you could turn around. He's got some tools. But yeah, I'm with you. I think they need one signing. I had other guys on my list who might have fit that. David Edwards, I don't really like him as much, but he's a better pass blocker than a run blocker, which I prefer at guard.
I think he's going to be overpaid. I think
you're probably right.
Going to be,
yes.
Yeah.
And Zion Johnson, you'd have to get him cheap to make the deal exciting, but he's not a terrible player, and he's not like terrible on really either side of the pass or run blocking scheme. So I'd like to see, a developmental option, given that he's still only 26 years old, would have been a pretty good one. And then the guy that's older, that fits the Zeitler mold, who I didn't take, but I could have, and I think he's going to be overpaid, is Isaac Seumalo of Pittsburgh. He probably is the top interior offensive lineman for my money in free agency, meaning I think Linderbaum's going to be overpaid, and Seumalo is really the guy on the interior who I think has more value. His pass blocking is very solid by multiple metrics. His run blocking is okay. That's, of course, is exactly the combination you want. I think he would make a lot of sense. And I think the Steelers have pretty much already given up that they can't afford him.
Which is crazy, the way that they've managed their cap through the last decade. But, fourth best pass blocker. PFF projects him for $8 million on a one-year deal. I think he's going to double that easily on a 3-year deal. We'll see how it goes, but I really do think that we've seen in the last 2-3 off seasons, offensive guards are becoming a premium position. They're getting paid big money.
Right. So, and I know you've changed some. You flipped a little bit in terms of your view of the draft and whether or not you can draft a guard in round one, and that the Ravens may actually be faced with that dilemma this year. So we'll see that. Just to be clear, Seumalo or Zeitler, same price. Who do you want?
For same price, I'll take Seumalo.
Yeah.
But if there's a big time price difference, 30% or more, I think Zeitler would be a fit. I think he can still play. I mean, there's interior guys that can play a long time.
They can. We got to be worried. In fact, I was worried on Zeitler's last contract that he wouldn't play his last year. Yeah. And so you have the old maid risk that exists. It's a risk with either of them. Seumalo at 32 and a half or whatever he is right now is certainly a risk to complete a contract. So you got to structure it right when you sign a player like that.
And then you got Calais Campbell entering another season at 40 years old.
Oh, is he actually saying he's going to play now?
Yeah, that's last I heard. I heard.
Did that come out in the last 2 weeks or something?
I heard it today from Jonas Schaefer. I think he had something on it. Yep.
Incredible. Okay, so Zeitler was your number 2 guy?
Correct.
Okay, my number 2 guy, I'm going outside the box a little bit. I'm going with Tyreek Woolen, as we knew him originally, a physical freak, certainly. Had a good year last year, not a great year, but it was a good year. 6.0 yards per target, 93.8 opposition passer rating. Gives you a ton of length, gives you a ton of speed on the outside. The Ravens really need that, and they need to get younger at the position. Very hard to get younger in free agency. You can do it. You're not doing it by re-signing Chidobe Awuzie. You might do it by signing a Tariq Woolen or Reek Woolen. Sorry, you got to get that name right. He's a guy who there's certainly risk, but the way this coaching staff is put together in terms of being extremely talented back end defensive coaches in Minter and Mickens and even Volker. Who's specifically from there, I think they'll be put together very well to maximize what they get out of that DB room.
For sure. I mean, the Chargers defense did not have supremely talented corners and put up the 5th best defense in the league. I've always liked Woolen. I'm not sure what he's going to cost. That would really be the thing. I don't want to overinvest too much more into corner when Minter may be able to coach up, and the staff and Mickens may be able to coach up a guy that's not quite ultra talented. What's a little bit concerning is this is his second contract, so he's going to be looking to maximize. And the projection I saw was $15 million a year on a 3-year deal. So that would price him way out of what I'm looking for out of a second corner.
I agree. I'd want about $40 million for 3 years. I'd be okay with that. They're moving on from Humphrey. I mean, I don't believe that Marlon Humphrey is coming back to as expected to be a corner at the start of the year. I do think he'll end up playing corner for the Ravens. It's just the way it works out. But I don't think they want him back as an expected corner. So we'll see how that works out. Mm-hmm. Okay, I bet we have the same number 1 guy because you've been talking about this guy all offseason.
Yes, Jalen Phillips, and that's the big swing, right? If they're going to take a big swing, that would be it. Now, you got to take into account that there is compensatory offset impact if you go for a guy like this. Tyler Linderbaum goes, and so it's a big deal. He would net you a 3rd, and then you sign Phillips, you can't sign a 3rd. It's a double whammy, almost like trading for a guy and then paying him 2, But he's really an ascending player, one of the top pass rushers in the league, not durable. Played a lot of snaps. The He had an 18% pressure rate, which is one of the best in the league last year. I think he was top 6 or 7. And the money is not crazy. At least according to PFF and Spotrac, both had his projection at $15 million. So I think because he has maybe some injury risk, especially when he was in college, that maybe depresses value a little bit. But if you're going to make a swing, that's what I would make the swing.
I'm good with it too. I mean, the close rate was below average, but not terrible at 21%. And the key thing is he just generates a ton of pressure. So the Ravens need many more of those guys. And I'm with you in the way you described it earlier. I want to see a swarm getting the quarterback. I want to see lots of guys who are capable of getting individual first pressures when they have a one-on-one matchup to win their rep, as opposed to getting there in time or secondarily, I don't want guys who are just limited to the bull rush, but primarily I want guys who can generate pressure as a group and create problems for the quarterback that create turnovers.
Completely agree.
So a couple other guys on the pass rush list that I was out on. I guess we don't need to go over every single one of those. Any honorable mentions for you?
I think Zion Johnson would be an honorable mention on a good team-friendly contract. He's still developing, I think you noted here, but he did have his best year last year. Mm-hmm. There's a couple guys. I mean, can you get Kwity Paye for cheap? Because he hasn't had a good pass rushing year yet, and he's going to be, really. But you are, again, like you said, you already have edge setters, so you don't necessarily need that. Nobody else is coming to mind. Let me check my other notes that I made earlier.
I'll give you one while you're checking here, and that's the Tennessee tight end Chig Okonkwo, the ex-Maryland guy. He's got a terrible record as a run blocker, which is something the Ravens may be scared away, but he's been actually pretty good as a pass blocker. Kind of a poor man's Likely in terms of being more of a flex guy who can get out there. Not a bad receiver. Hasn't broken out, certainly. So I don't think he's going to cost a lot, which is one of the exciting things about it. I think he could be a $2 to $4 million guy. If he ends up making $8 million for somebody, then good luck. Good luck to you, Chig.
Yeah, I've liked him too. He's more like an H-back build. He's a little bit smaller, but if you can get him and he serves the role. The other guy I did write down earlier, and Tim Settle, the defensive tackle from the Texans, who's a much better pass rusher than run stuffer, which probably fits the role pretty well because you already have 3 nose tackles coming back.
Yeah, he'd be an excellent choice. I know this came up the last time we discussed Tim Settle, but I thought he already signed with the Texans. I thought he already signed an extension with the Texans. But you're saying no, he's not signed. He's a free agent.
I checked it last time, and I just saw it on the list. I'll double check again, if you want to.
No, that's okay. I'm on board on Tim Settle in terms of him being a very reasonable option. What we saw him do against the Ravens was extremely dominant against them in that week. What was it, 5 game or so early in the season when they were at the tail end of their 1-5 start. I think it was week 5.
Yeah, everything I'm seeing says he's a UFA. So, and he's 28 years old. And we should also probably touch on. There's been some new developments on the Nnamdi Madubuike front since you departed. We've heard that he was in the building and he came to Baltimore for whatever. And then we also heard a report from the combine that he's not going to retire, which we knew he's not going to retire because he's not going to give up the money, but things are trending in an optimistic direction.
Okay. I want to be really careful about this. I've noted that some people are saying things and, I don't want to be part of that is all I'll say. If Nnamdi is back, fantastic. And the Ravens clearly would love to have him. He'd be very valuable, and it would change a lot of how they probably viewed the draft. That said, I think they're still in a position where they need either a 1 or 3 tech in their plans for day 1 or day 2, fourth round at the latest, where they can find somebody to be the new running mate for Travis Jones if it doesn't work out for Madubuike. So anyway,
not a great year for 3 techs in free agency or the draft necessarily. There's there's a couple guys, but you gotta kind of squint to find those 3 checks in this draft class. So if you could get Namdi back, that'd be tremendous, obviously. But Tim Settle's a guy that could also fill that role very admirably, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One other guy on my list who I really like as a safety, but may wind up being way too expensive, is Brian Cook. He's a pure free safety from Kansas City. It could be a big luxury, particularly if Marlon were to move to the position. But if you want a guy who can shut things down on the back end at free safety, he'd be a very nice play. There's a bunch of older guys around too who might be reasonable fits. Kevin Byard is around. If great price, I bring him in. But anyway,
Ballhawk, yeah, they projected what's his name, Brian with the Y, Cook, 3 years, $12 million each. So they're expecting, but the safety market oftentimes does not live up to expectations. Less in the last few years. It's pretty good safety draft too. There's a guy, Bud Clark. He's a ball hawk that I like in the draft this year, maybe 4th or 5th round.
All right, fair enough. Outstanding stuff. How about ready for the mailbag right now?
Sure.
Let's move ahead. Angela of 85, very regular contributor. By the way, everybody who's contributing this, we appreciate. Actually, a fairly light total questions, probably due to the fact that I've been posting stuff the last couple of weeks, and I apologize for that, Vas. But Angela of 85 says, "Hi, Ken and Vas. If the Ravens sign Lindy for $20 million or more, is that as big of a mistake as signing Roquan for $20 million? We should not pay for leadership." This is where it becomes a statement. "I think we can go cheaper at center in the draft and spend more on guards and IDL."
So I agree with not paying for leadership or locker room intangibles. I think you want to pay for on-field production. I've just always been against signing more one-dimensional players when that one dimension is the run game. And that goes back to the Brandon Williams contract in 2014 or whatever it was. I think that could apply in a way to Linderbaum. I think it could apply in a way to Roquan just because although he's a better coverage player than most linebackers, he just doesn't give you anything as a pass rusher. That's the weakest part of his game, and that's obviously part of defending the pass. As big of a mistake, I wouldn't say so. I think that because it's scarcity, right? At the end of the day, a lot of part of positional value and valuation is scarcity. There's a lot of linebackers that are the same size and shape as Roquan. There's not as many Linderbaums out there, centers that can move. So it's kind of a weird question, but if you're asking to parse it that way, I would say probably Roquan was the less wise decision.
Okay, I'd go the other way exactly. I think that Roquan's delivered 3 All-Pro 1 years. I know there's people who you're gonna shout out that his PFF grades were lower than that. He did it with smoke and mirrors. I don't really think that's true completely, and I understand there's some difference there, but a lot of it is what the Ravens have had to require Roquan doing, and it's because you have Patrick Queen playing next to him. If Patrick Queen playing is a very limited player in terms of what he can do. Roquan has to be the leader in terms of trying to stop the run. He also has to be your primary coverage linebacker because you can't trust Patrick Queen to do it. So you end up with a player who's like C.J. Mosley before him was doing things pretty well at a damn high level that because you couldn't expect him to do the other thing, and that meant he's limited as a pass rusher. It's part of why he's limited as a pass rusher. And he did rush the passer a fair amount of times without a lot of success this last year.
Yeah, I view both those positions as they should be autonomous positions. You shouldn't need the guy next to you to help you if you're going to be paid at the highest level. You should be able to thrive on your own.
Okay, so, I agree with that comment. Let me stop you. Yeah. I agree with that comment. I don't think it excuses Tyler Linderbaum or Daniel Falele for being who they were. So I'm not saying that. I think that in terms of Roquan's opportunity set to make splashy plays that would have made him appear to have value, he had fewer of those really top-line opportunities, fewer of those top-end opportunities to rush the passer under optimal circumstances.
Okay. Let me give you one coverage stat for Roquan. Yards per target, which is, I think, your favorite. 2022 with the Ravens, 6. 2023 23 with the Ravens, 8.2. 2024 with the Ravens, 9.5. 2025, back down to 6. I don't think you can excuse that all the way by saying the safeties weren't helped. If you're going to pay a guy at the top of the market, he should be able to do better than that on his own.
Oh, I mean, that's a really good 4-year run of yards per target for an inside linebacker. That's a really good run. If you look at inside linebackers totally, they'll give up a lot of yards per target. And the reason is typically the way PFF assigns those targets, because they assign the underneath player for a lot of level 2 versus level 3 throws instead of the safety. So I think if you looked across the league, and we could do it,
he was better in Chicago. So before he came, he was in the 5s and the 4s and that sort of thing. So they asked him to do a lot because they paid him so much. You can't have a good linebacker next to you when you're paying a guy big money sometimes. Anyway, enough of that. We can go on to the next one. We disagree, but it is what it is.
There you go. CK Ravens fan says this: so much of the Ravens' identity relies on draft and development. Do you have concerns about the ability to develop players in the post-Harbaugh era?
Actually, the opposite. I think the Ravens may be in a better position to develop players with some of the better coaches they have. They brought in a lot of teachers on defense, as Jesse Minter said. I think Ledford is an upgrade at offensive line compared to the Warhop. I think that they have an all-star staff that I'm really excited to see. So I think that they're going to, and if you think about it, it's not like they've been developing all the day 3 or round 3, round 4, round 5 guys. They've developed a few of them in the last few years, but not a great percentage, I wouldn't say.
But over the Ravens' history, it's been a higher percentage than other teams in the league. So they've got that to ride back on, including even in the DaCosta era. So I don't think there's that problem. I guess I would say this, and any staff change like this, there's risk. There's a whole bunch of components of the Ravens' way that were very positive. I absolutely love the way the Ravens have tried to address that in their coaching. I agree with you completely, by the way, on Ledford, who is a significant component of the teaching for the whole team in teaching the offensive line is a very big upgrade. I think Mickens is potentially a guy who could really improve a lot of defensive backs, because that certainly was his background at Notre Dame. I think we do not yet know how and why Harbaugh will be missed. And there's a whole lot of people within range of my voice that we're not going to miss Harbaugh. All of this is all those playoff losses or these 10-point leads that are blown. There's a whole bunch of people out there who basically just have a hyperbolic view of that, and they think that Harbaugh never did anything good for the organization, and that's complete crap. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you can't see about all the wins the Ravens have had over the years. That the addiction to weight training, that Harbaugh's personal commitment to it, that gets players excited. Hey, my coach can squat 500 pounds or whatever it is. I'm
not sure if I agree with that last comment, but let me ask you this, Ken. We'll wrap on this. So Minter has alluded to, I don't remember the exact terminology, but he wants to evolve. I think he said he wants the evolution of the Ravens way. Any idea what that? How do you see that materializing?
That's interesting. I don't know exactly what that would mean, but it's fine to have an evolution of the Ravens way. If you're basically saying we're starting from this point, we'll have an evolution of it. We're not completely changing it. We like a lot of things about the Ravens. That's exactly what they should do. I mean, I think the hiring, and I had a separate episode on this about the Dr. Nick Gill hiring. That is a great outside the box hire. I just love it. It might work out, it might not, but it's a great hire, and it's tying together some departments that I think might have been either working autonomously or reporting to someone who didn't really put the pieces together the way that he will.
Yeah, that was a shot that Harbaugh took when he went to the Giants. He said they had I forget what a certain position that it looks like Gill is going to fill here that wasn't here previously. I forget, recovery maybe. It might have been the recovery department. But, it just speaks to Steve Bisciotti's commitment to this team and spending money outside the salary cap to benefit the team. So I definitely agree with you. I want to start from the foundation of the Ravens as they have done it and evolve a few things, tweak a few things here, tweak a few things there, and hopefully get even better results.
All right. Vas, always a pleasure doing this show with you. Tell folks where they can talk football.
My pleasure, Ken. My pleasure. I am on Twitter X at Vasilis Lurikos, VASILISLERIKOS.
All right. Other folks out there, lots of good stuff on Film Study Baltimore. We're just getting ramping up again, but we've got three great episodes. There's a Dr. Nick Gill episode worth a listen. It's done with a guy named Baha Al-Haji Ba is his name. He goes by Baha. Terrific discussion, I think, of Dr. Gill, and he went into some of the videos that he had on his own website, and I think he's done more thoughtful analysis of what's out there that I really liked. Great episode yesterday I recorded about the last 14 Super Bowl winners and how they spent their money, their cap dollars, and actually spent their resources, because also their JJ points. So how many times? And I'll just say that the guy who did this, who's Matt Simmons, lives somewhere else in the world. I think it's Thailand he lives in now, but he's kind of moving around, but he's a UK guy originally. Did a fantastic job in terms of the judgments and the assumptions that went into this. So he's now created a spreadsheet. I've got to put that out there so people can get it. I know you wanted a copy, Vas. You mentioned
he already sent it to me, actually. I was looking at it earlier.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
great study. I've been trying to find a way to merge, consolidate those two items for a long time, and he did a great job with it.
And the one point was that the center, the average spend at center over the last 14 Super Bowl winners is 1.99% of cap. So Linderbaum is going to make something like 8% of cap potentially. Now he won't make that in 27 because they'll minimize the cap impact on the first year,
sure.
But then he'll pay more than that in future years is what that means. So it'll be an average of 8% of cap over the life of the contract, maybe 7. It's a big number to pay your center, and there's only been 3 teams that have won paying, I think, over maybe it was about 3 or 3.5% of cap during that period.
Yep.
All right. And I got one other coming up, and this I'm really looking forward to. Talking to a guy from Wharton tomorrow who's a PhD candidate, and this will be out, I think, on Tuesday of next week, about how significant it is that leads are blown in the NFL. And he says leads get blown a lot more than you expect them to. And his key statistic was that the losing team on average has a 73% chance to win the game at its highest point. So fascinating material to kind of dig into. I had a lot of questions about methodology and whatnot. We're going to get into that when I talk to him tomorrow. But I tell you what, there's some mathematical episodes I really look forward to, and this is one of them. I think that you're going to find there's good information on there. So whatever your bent is, we got some stuff on Film Study Ravens for you, and Vas and I, of course, will be here next week again, and we'll talk to you then.